Okay, hello. Welcome back. There we go. I think that's perfect. Okay, so what we're going to do is we are going to first off make a list here of all of the pots that are 25 big blinds and greater. And yeah, I still think that that's a pretty good, I guess, an arbitrary limit. It's 25 big blinds. This one actually has 16 hands. So we're going to try to get the 16 plus the 11, so probably 27 hands we're going to try to get in, and see what we find. So an update. This is 13,500 hands at 50 NL, and I am in the red, running negative 5.36 dB, or I guess 6.6 or the EV, whichever one you want to use. I'm not entirely certain that the EV matters, because I think over a very long term the net one is probably going to be the same as the USD EV adjusted over a decent sample. So it looks like it's about 8 or 9 buy-ins so far that I'm down, and nothing to worry about. I did have a pretty rough beginning to 50 NL, and definitely a little bit of spew, and just a rocky start with some big pots. And so that's why I'm doing these review videos, is to get better and to figure out where I'm being a donkey and to fix it. So last night, I believe, was the first time where I feel like 50 NL might actually be sticking with me. It's actually starting to make a little bit more sense to me. Like playing in 3-bet pots and understanding when to bluff, or to bluff equity, and when to check behind versus different villains. Just the villains at 50 NL are super aggro. Like, as you see, the first hand I have here, I'm being 3-bet. This is a pretty taggy stats. 2016, 6.4%. His squeeze is 10.3. So I think that I can call this. I think that an 10.3% squeeze range is going to have a lot of hands that are weaker than Jack Ace suited. I do have a suited ace, and I am on the button versus a very big fish. This player is actually a whale, and he overshoved the pot the other night with 4th pair, 4-2 offsuit when a queen hit the turn, and I had pocket aces, and I called. He shoved like $78 into $18 on the turn, and I had a call over 100 big blinds to that call. But I mean, I had pocket rockets, and I knew that he was a pretty whaley, fishy player, so he bluff shoved the turn, $78 into like $18 with 4-2 offsuit on a queen 9-6-2 board or something like that. Okay, so he 3-bets, and I flat in position, and I get checked to. And whenever this happens, I think that there's actually quite a ton of hands that this player could have that might just want to give up, because if he has a hand like mine, like let's say he has Jack Ace of spades, he's not going to want to call bet. If he has pocket 10s with no heart, or I guess pocket 7s or something like that, he's not going to want to call bet. If he has ace king offsuit with a spade and a diamond, he's not going to want to call bet. And the only time that I'm going to be check raised is if he flops a flush, or if he has something like pocket aces with the ace of hearts, Um, but okay, so I actually believe that I should have bet this. I'm not really sure why I'm checking. Because he checked to me, I'm going to believe that he didn't really hit the board very well. So I actually believe that I should have bet like maybe 650, $7, something smallish. Okay, so whenever the next heart comes out, he checks again, and now I decide to bet. I can actually represent. I can represent. Definitely can represent a heart, even if it's a weak heart. If he doesn't have a heart in his hand, he's not really going to want to check raise me. If he has like ace king, like I said before, like a spade and a diamond or something like that, there's no reason for him to check raise me unless he has the ace of hearts, or if he flopped a nut flush. So he does end up check raising me, and this is just a very easy fold. But I really think that I should have bet the flop, and I believe that that would have been better than betting the turn. Although if the turn card does come out, like it does, I can still represent like a jack of hearts, queen, king of hearts, or my line would just to be the bet one time, get called by pocket jacks maybe, and then to check behind like a jack or queen of hearts. I could definitely take this line with a heart, so it's not like I'm being too bluffy here. I mean, it doesn't look bluffy in my opinion, but yeah, it's what it is. Jack king offsuit, I don't mind squeezing, but the problem is that I squeezed whenever the stacks were a little deeper. Now this player is, as you see, pretty, I would say, out of bounds. He's a pretty aggro player, pretty gambly type of player, I would say. And I don't believe that he's going to fold to a squeeze from under the gun range almost ever. Whenever he's like 160, 170 big blinds deep. If this was 100 big blind stacks, then I think that my squeeze would have been a little bit, the chances of it getting fold equity would be higher. And also, there's a fish on the button, and this player might be more inclined to call because the fish is going to call as well. But the fish does fold. I completely whiff the flop here, and I make a bet, and my plan is to actually just bet one time probably, and then just give up. And at this point, I can't really do much except for check fold the river. If he calls the flop bet, he either has like a flush draw, an overpair, or ace king, like an ace high of some sort. So my jack king is not really gonna do much. I mean, I have to hope that he's calling with like jack queen suited or 10 jacks suited of diamonds or something like that. I don't expect him to fold any pair on this flop. But then, of course, whenever he bets the river, check raising might be a little bit. I probably could have check raised, but I have decided not to bluff aggro players because I believe that aggro players are also very big donkeys, and I can see him making a hero call ace high here, just because he's a donkey. I don't think the hand wasn't too bad, but I think that it was kind of a pointless squeeze whenever stacks are so deep, because again, I don't believe I'm going to get much fold equity. Whenever this player squeezes a 10% 3-bet or 10% squeeze, and then this player calls, so it's the under the gun range opens, gets squeezed by the big blind. So I expect both of their ranges to be pretty damn tight. This player isn't going to be squeezing too light versus an under the gun range, I'm quite sure. There's also a fish in the blinds and also another fish in the small blind. So I'm hoping that what happens is I'm going to call. I don't really expect them to shove over the top because they're not showing much aggression. 3.8%, 0%, bet turn of 0. Like they don't really seem too aggro. They're just like passive fish, I guess. Well, at this point, their stats, and they're shorter stacked, of course, but I don't think that they're going to be shoving if they just flat pre-flop. So I do make the call, and actually both of the fish fold, so maybe that says something about me. But the reason I called is because I was expecting them to call, which gives me a lot more equity to call for a set mining. And I do miss the set, but I also have to hope that maybe they both have like ace king, ace queen suited or something like that, and they're not going to want to call flop bets. So I decide to make like a protection bet here just to hopefully win the pot. If they want to check raise me with aces or kings, then I'm fucked anyway. Or maybe if they want to check raise with ace king suited or ace queen suited, or I don't know, maybe he flop top set and he wants to check raise. Like you never really know. And actually, that I have a little paper flashcard here that I have other stats that I want to add to my HUD. One of them is check raise stat, and also a fold flop and 3-bet pot stat. I actually don't believe that my my bet here is too bad. It's a little iffy. If they have something like pocket kings or pocket queens, I don't really expect them to be check shoving this flop because it actually hits our ranges pretty hard. And then I can actually maybe suck out with a 6 or an 8 on the turn, or maybe get backdoor diamonds if a diamond hits, and then I can check behind. But as you see, I do get check raised, and maybe maybe I set myself up for this, but I don't know. I think that he would have check raised regardless of my bet sizing. I really didn't want to invest too much, and I don't really consider this much of a bluff. I do expect this player to be barreling his overpairs on this board quite a lot rather than check raising. And if I did have a set on this board, I would actually use this sizing a lot of the time as well to induce a check shove like this player actually did. Because I mean, what am I afraid of? I'm not really afraid of a diamond because I would expect somebody to be betting their diamonds, and if an 8 hits, then if they have pocket jacks, then I can just check behind and hope that I boat up or get quads. So I don't actually believe that was too bad. One could probably argue that I should have folded pre-flop, but again, I did believe that the fish were going to be behind me, and I think that if I flopped a set on like an 8-6-3 flop or something similar to that, or like a king 6-5, then I could actually possibly have a set over set and also maybe an ace king. But I just felt like it was a good spot to call. I wouldn't have called pocket 2s or 3s or 4s. I think pocket 6s was like the line that I would draw because the fish could actually have under pairs at that point. But if I called with pocket 2s, then it would be like a 5-way pot, and if I do flop a set, I actually would be worried about an overset at that point with like pocket 2s or pocket 3s. If it's like a a 9-5-3 flop. So I'm flatting the small blind. I don't expect to be squeezed by this player, and I think that they're a little bit weaker, and I would hope that they were going to call the big blind. A weaker player over here at 37-13, and also Dewey Poppy. I played so many hands versus him, 3.8k hands, that I think that Jack 9 suited is an okay call here. And the big blind does call, and I flop top pair with a gut shot. So Dewey Poppy obviously bets because he's very bet happy. I call, and the turn card is a 4. It goes check check. I don't see any reason to lead out here a donk because I do have a weak top pair at this point. So I believe that if this player had an overpair, they'd be betting the turn as well. And now whenever the 10 comes out, if he has backdoor spades, he's going to jam on me regardless of what I do. But I don't expect him to be bluffing this because I think that he does have some kind of a showdown value. He did bet into 4 players, and then he checked to turn. So I think that maybe he has Jack Queen or Jack King. Maybe Jack Ace. Maybe pocket 10s. So I think that this is a really good spot to lead out the donk because it looks like my diamonds broke. So I bet $10, just a little bit of a value bet, and I do get called. And I do believe that I remember that he had Jack King suited, but it's not showing his cards. Three betting Ace Queen suited for value versus this player here. And whenever the flop comes King 10-4, he has $15 remaining in the pot's 1075. I have a Broadway draw with overcards to any crap that he might have. And he checks and I just jam all in. This is a 50 BB table, and I don't like these tables because, as you see, like, these awkward sizings occur whenever you 3-bet. But I do decide to jam, and he calls. And he had a draw with Ace-Jack suited, and I do win the pot, so that's a nice hand. 10 Ace offsuit, I'm actually 3-betting. I guess you could say for value, sort of as a bluff as well. And I'm trying to figure out how this player is going to play in 3-bet pots in position. They are an extremely weak player. They are very aggro as well. And as you see, 15% 4-bet, 10% squeeze, 9% 3-bet. Fold to 3-bet is 50%. But it seems like he's actually, he 4-bets quite a shitload. And I do decide to flat, because if I hit an ace, he might barrel the ace. I want to see how bluffy he is. I'm willing to risk my stack with 10 Ace offsuit versus this player with a 15% 4-bet, and just to kind of see how he reacts. So he bets 1275, and I actually flop pretty damn nice. I have a backdoor 10 high spade draw. I have a gut shot, and I also have overcards, like an ace overcard. And I expect him to be barreling this board 100% of the time in a 4-bet pot, no matter what he has. And so I decided to check jam. He snap folds. This was a snap fold. He didn't even think about it. So it makes me realize that he's probably 4-betting pretty light, like probably ace, even something like ace 3 of clubs, perhaps. Something that's just not going to want to continue on this board. Even pocket 4s, perhaps. Like, I don't know how loose this player is. I have seen some other lags, not often, but like a couple instances where they do dumb stuff like 4-bet pocket 4s. but they have really no equity unless they hit a set. I mean, at least here I have an equity of some sort. I have high card, I have Broadway equity, you know, like a nut flush equity. Because this player limped, when this player tries to isolate, it's a very weak isolation size. I would have gone to 225 or so. If he went to 225, I would have folded 7-9 suited. But as it is, I wanted to get into a pot with this 73-0 player. And I flopped pretty nice. I can't really ask for a better flop with 7-9 suited. I think that I'm planning on check raising this. Or actually, maybe not, just check calling, because I expect this O and D player to call almost all of his range on this flop. Any pocket pair, any 6x, 5x. And they actually raise. They check raise. And whenever a fish check raises a 73-0, that's kind of time to be a little bit nervous. But I do have a monster draw here, and I do hit my spade. So whenever the spade comes, I believe that this player, if they do have a set or a strong queen, I expect them to bet this almost always. And he bets really small. The pot's already $41, and he has $18 remaining. And I don't really want another spade to come out, so I decided just to check jam it all in. And the fish folds, so I'm not really sure what they're doing. Very confused by that. I'd expect a queen X to almost always call that. Or maybe not. I mean, maybe they're just a very passive, very timid fish, and they're basically betting for information, planning on just folding if I check raise, because they're afraid of a flush. So I don't know, maybe he did have a queen, but there's not really much else I can do there, except just check jam. Jack King suited, again, I actually have position on this Tomy poker, this weak player here. And I mean, another reason why I call them a weak player is because like they actually min bet in position with pocket aces on the turn to like a drawy low flop, and like just things that are a little fishy. Like if you min bet, it just allows the player to check raise you if they do have a boat or set or flush or something like that. So if you want to check behind, then just check behind, but there's no reason to min bet on the turn in position, unless you're just seriously trying to get tricky and like conceal the fact that you have pocket aces. But I don't know, it's kind of weird. So he does call. I think that he's calling my 3-bets a little bit more than this stat shows, because maybe he's trying to like outplay me or something, I don't know. But I have backdoor diamonds and I have overcards. So I actually, again, like I'm just trying to figure out what he's gonna do, like how he's gonna play. I'm happy to see a turn card for free and then to kind of reassess. So when the 4 comes out, he actually checks again. And this was a mistake that I made, which it was an accident. But at the same time, I didn't actually realize that there were 3 4s on the board. I know it sounds kind of stupid, but and at this point, I'm trying to rep a flush, or I'm just trying to, even if I have ace high, he's going to fold all of his non-ace high hands. If he has a low pocket pair, he's probably going to call again. So I bet pretty big. He snap calls me. And now I was trying to rep a flush draw, or maybe like an overpair at this point. And now what happens is I decide that I should bet again. And I bet 15, and I expect any underpair to the queen to fold at this point, because the flush is on the board, a queen's on the board, and he snap calls me. and shows pocket fives. So this is the information that I need now, that I've been trying to get from this player by having these dynamics, is to realize that I should never bluff this player ever again. Because if they're gonna snap call me like this with pocket fives on this run out, I think that they're definitely a very weak player. I don't think that he should have maybe folded the pocket fives, but I didn't realize that there were 3 4s, so he has a boat now. And I guess maybe it looks a little weird that I'm betting the flush so hard whenever there's 3 4s on the board. But the snap call with pocket fives, I think he should have thought through it a little bit. He wasn't worried that I had an overpair, or that I checked an overpair on this flop, like kings or aces. He wasn't worried about it at all. Or maybe I hit a queen on the river. Like, he just snap called that shit. $15 bet. So that was an accident on my part. I wouldn't have bombed the river if I knew there were 3 4s on the board. So I'm being 3-bet by a 28-21, 8% 3-bet. 3-betting my cutoff range. And I flop very nice here. Backdoor spades, straight draw, overcards to a lot of his like 9s and 8s and things like that. He bets, and I decide that this is a good time to just raise kind of smallish. I can represent jacks, fives, king jack, ace king, and if he does have something like ace 8 suited, I expect him just to fold that almost always, or pocket 9s or pocket 10s, I expect him to fold that. He snap min 4-bets me, so now I have to call another $9 into a $48 pot. So this is the easiest call of my life. I have tremendous equity. Beautiful, it's beautiful, as Trump would say. So I call, and at this point I expect him to be jamming almost any turn. And I don't hit my 9 or ace. If it was a 9 of spades, I probably would have called a shove. I mean an 8. Wait, no. 8 of spades? So I still have a straight draw. Whenever he shoves, I can't call it. I don't have equity, so I fold. Tough luck to me. I didn't hit my 8-outer to min 4-bet. But if I did hit the 8-outer, I would have got him in stack, guaranteed. And I was pretty confident that if an ace hits, he's still gonna shove. So I'm actually I'm building the pot versus this whale who limped under the gun, and I decided to just bet. Now I have a heart draw, so I put out a blocker bet. I don't want him to jam on me or anything like that, or for me to check and him to pot it, because I expect him to pot a lot of the time because he's a whale. Whales like to pot. They just hit the pot button and bet like 1073. So he calls. I hit the flush, and at this point I could probably just jam all in, because a whale is not going to expect a backdoor flush. He might have 7-10, queen 10, a set at this point, a weaker flush. So I think jamming all in is a fine play. He snap calls me, and he shows 7 king offsuit. So he is calling me with 3rd pair to the board, and I made my line look a little bluffy. The turn bet was a little bluffy. So whenever I jam all in, he probably thinks I'm bluffing, and he called me down with 7 king offsuit. So knowing how to play against massive whales, is going to net you a very nice win rate. Extra win rate, I should say, because I'm not actually showing a positive win rate yet. Sadly, nobody 3-bets me, but I am in a pot versus this whale again. I bet, they call. I bet again, and they jam. And now I remember that this player jammed with the 4-2 offsuit the other night with the fourth pair, no draws, 4-2 offsuit. So this is like the easiest call of my life. I have pocket aces. I mean, what the hell could he actually have on this board? You know, I'm blocking the wheel. So, and he has 5-3 offsuit. So I stuck out here with 7, but that's still the easiest call of my life. Fine play, fine play. So I flop top pair with the flush draw, a straight flush draw, and a straight draw. So it's kind of an awkward spot because I still only have top pair at this point. So, yeah. Okay, so I do turn the flush, and I bet again, and I get raised. So I've realized that whenever I do hit a nutty hand, sometimes I really shouldn't bomb the pot. I should actually underbet it a little bit versus weak lags, weak aggressive players. And I expect him to be raising this with pretty wide range. It makes it look like I'm afraid of the flush. So whenever he raises this, I'm very happy to call. Now, I don't expect him to be raising the turn with a set. If he's raising the turn, he's going to be raising it with either a flush or with either an air ball of some sort. Or maybe a 9x, like 9 ace with an ace of spades, I suppose. But I don't ever expect him to have a boat here. Jack 9 suited. I think the only Jack 9 suited would be of diamonds. Or I guess, no, clubs. Because there's a heart, a spade, and a club of Jack 9-9. So if he has Jack 9 suited, it would have to be of diamonds. So that's like one combo that he might be raising the turn with. Maybe. But the only thing that I can do here is to just check call. I don't really think that check jamming is appropriate because I think that his range is extremely polarized right now. And it is possible that he has ace 10 suited or 7 ace suited or something like that. But I win a really nice pot here by underbetting the turn. And he shows a straight draw. It's so bizarre, some of the things that they do. Like, why would he ever raise the turn and bluff the river with a straight draw after I underbet and then call his... It's just... So again, there's a lot of really weak regs that are extremely aggro at 50-0, and they don't really have a restraint. They don't have any breaks. And a lot of the time, a lot of the biggest pots I've been winning is whenever I actually underbet either the river or the turn. And if I underbet the river, I mean, sometimes it induces them to just spew jam, to check spew jam all in, because they think that I'm trying to extract value from like maybe a weak top pair or something like that. And they just check spew like pocket fives or something like that. All in. And I snap called him because my plan was to induce a bluff to begin with. So here, this is actually the same player as before, Tommy Poker. He bets, I turn a set, I check, and he min bets. And at this point, he either has an overpair, he's either being a complete freaking fish, with a straight of some sort, like 5-7 suited, I guess, or maybe ace 5 suited. Wait, ace 5? Yeah, ace. No, ace 5. Ace 5 wouldn't have a straight. So I guess 5-7 suited is the only combo that he would have for straight at this point. So I don't really see any reason to like raise it small. I think that he's either on a draw or he has an overpair of some sort that he's just trying to be a fish by betting, min betting, I guess, or maybe a set as well. He's trying to disguise his hand by maybe min betting pocket fours, I suppose. So I expect to be raised some of the time with his super premium sets like 3s and 4s. 5-7 suited I expect to be raised, but he doesn't. I bowed up on the turn, and I'm thinking that he's never gonna do this with something like 8-4 suited or 8-6 suited on the turn. There's no reason for him to min bet the turn with 8-6 suited or 8-4 suited. That just doesn't make any sense to me. I don't think that a weak player is going to find a reason to min bet those specific hands. I think that it's either he's trying to disguise a super strength hand, like maybe quad 8s, but at this point I expect him to have 3s, 4s, quads, or an overpair of some sort, or a broken flush. Or maybe 5-7 suited. So I do check to. I plan on check raising really, really big. There's no hand that he has that can beat me at this point except for quads, and even if he bets, he bets really big here on the river. So I'm giving him credit for. I believe he has pocket 3s or pocket 4s at this point. And so I decide to raise really, really big. Although I probably could have considered jamming all in. If I jam all in, I guess it's going to be another 68 to him. So the pot's 36 plus 68 would be like 104. So the pot would be 104. And he'd have to call 69 into 104. But I actually believe that maybe he could also have an 8x of some sort. I don't know, like a weak 8x, like 8, 7, 8, 9. His min bet on the turn is just so fishy. But again, I'm not worried that he has any hand that has me beat, so I'm only trying to get value from anything that. Maybe pocket 7s, I guess. He could have min bet the turn. Something like that's weak that he just min bet for some unknown reason. And I expect that if he does have pocket 4s or pocket 3s, he might actually be jamming over the top a lot of the time as well. So I raised to 37, 14, 28. It's like basically this times 1.5. I guess, like 28, 35, 37, 1.6 times this, 2.6, I guess it would be. I think that I probably could have raised bigger to maybe 50. I think that if he's planning on calling this check raise, he's going to call a bigger check raise as well. And I think that his range is either it's either a nutty range or a bluff catching range. So actually I think I'm gonna say that I should have check raised as bigger. I think I could have gone at least 42, and maybe to 50, maybe like a $50 check raise of some sort. He does call, I don't think that that's actually a very small check raise for the pot size. So the the pot's already 36. He has to call another 23 into 73. I would have liked to have made it so he has to call like a half pot bet. So if I raised it to, I guess, 50, it would be 86, and he'd have to call 36 more. So that's closer to a half pot. I think maybe 55, 56 would have been more of a half pot call. So I do believe that that was a little bit on the low side of a check raise to what hands I believe he was representing at that point. I flat ace queen offsuit versus a whale, and I probably could have three. Oh, actually no, they're opening pretty big here. So he bets pretty small. I don't see any reason to raise. Whenever he bets the turn, he's either going to want to call a raise or he's not. So if he does want to call a raise, I think that I can raise pretty big. So I guess 15 is an okay size. It's like 3 times his bet. And they do call, and the river bricks, thank God. And now I'm shoving 29 into 42, which is a really good price versus a whale who might have 10 jack or king 10 or pocket aces maybe, or a set, and they call, and they have ace king, so that's a nice pot for me. I win a nice pot. I bank my Broadway on the turn. Now I would also make a note about them that maybe they open raise pre-flop bigger depending on their hand strength, because ace king was a pretty big raise pre-flop. Being 3-bet by 10% 3-better, 2.2% 4-bet, 30-24, 3.3 aggression factor, 6.5 squeeze. The 2.2 4-bet percentage is a little interesting. As you see, this player has 15% 3-bet, but a smaller 4-bet, but a smaller 3-bet, and a bigger squeeze than this player as well. This player, or I have a 10% 4-bet. This player has an 8.7% 4-bet. So the 2.2% 4-bet is very interesting to me. But I have notes on this player that they're extremely bluffy and aggro post flop. But either way, I do have pocket queens. I'm not really afraid of anything really, and he just snap jams over the top of me, and I feel like I should just call this because I have pocket queens. They have kings this time, so maybe I'd make a note that if I get into enough hands with them, that, yeah, you'll see this one too. So this player is squeezing these small raises pre-flop, and I have queens again versus them. This is like 4 hands later that he stacked me with queens versus kings. The same thing happens is that he's 3-betting. I decide to 4-bet pretty big. So the pot's already 22-43. Again, he snap jams over the top. I call because I have queens. And he flopped the nuts. So he had ace king suited that time versus queens, and I couldn't even hit my spade because he already had the nuts. Yeah, so maybe that player doesn't 5-bet jam very light. If he had 10s or jacks or ace queen suited, he might just call the 4-bet rather than, or queens, jacks, he might just call the 4-bet rather than jamming. So we're gonna get to this next set here. 45-minute video so far. I'm opening 9 queen and I get 3-bet pretty small and we're super deep, so I feel like calling this, and it's 3-way. So I flop top 2 pair and it goes check check. I was planning on check raising, obviously. I don't see any reason to check the turn or to check the river, and I was actually I underbet the river to induce a bluff from like a broken ace of diamonds on the flush draw here. I don't expect him to have anything like, I don't expect him to, well, he might raise king 9 or king 5, but I don't expect him to be raising with the flush on the board unless he has a broken flush of an ace of diamonds or a jack of diamonds or something like that. He doesn't take the bait, but he did have a king jack, I think, or king 10 or something like that. Opening pocket 6s and I get 3-bet, and we're super deep. And I don't flop a set, but he goes check check. Now, whenever he checks behind, I expect him to have a very strong overpair like kings or aces, maybe queens sometimes. Just a pot control, I guess. I don't expect him to have any diamond draws. I think that he would bet that almost 100% of the time. And I also expect him to have a lot of ace kings and ace queens, or maybe pocket pairs like pocket 5s. Maybe he's, no, I don't think he's ever gonna check behind a set. So I think maybe pocket 3s, pocket 5s, perhaps. Pocket 8s might even check behind, I guess. So I decided to check for a check raise. I don't think that he's gonna be wanting to call anything except for maybe ace king. So I'm actually hoping that he is checking value and I can put a really, really huge check raise in. So whenever this comes out, I think I'm just going to get value from ace king now. And he calls. And it's not showing his cards, but he did have pocket 3s. So he 3-bet with pocket 3s, checked behind, and then checked the turn as well, just trying to get to showdown. And whenever I bet, I'm surprised he didn't actually raise me here, because is he really just afraid of pocket 5s or a 5x? I think he probably should have raised and then decided to fold if I came over the top. I'm surprised he didn't. I'm really surprised he didn't raise the pocket 3s here, because there's a lot of combinations that I could be betting that is not 5x. Ace 5 suited and 5-6 suited, I suppose, and maybe pocket 5s are the only combos that I could have. So I'm flatting king. I'm defending king 10 suited to a small open from the button. Sometimes I could 3-bet, but I think that maybe I would prefer just to see a flop for cheap. I do flop second pair. When the second ace comes out, I think that I should probably just call this as well. And now, whenever third ace comes out, I don't think I'm ever going to have to be able to fold to a river bet, because he could just be value betting a king as well for a chop. So, I mean, the chances that he has an ace are less than the chances that he is value betting a king queen at this point, or maybe some kind of a spew or bluff, which probably isn't going to be very high frequency, but you never know. He does have an ace 2 offsuit, so that was an unlucky hand. Opening 6-8 suited, I flop 2 pair, and I basically pot it because there's a fish and a fish, just like 2 fish. And he jams, I call, I boat up, and he jams queen 8 offsuit, so that's another pot that I win. Nothing to talk about there really, except you need to always change your bet sizings depending on the texture and also who you're playing against. If I pot this versus a reg, they might know that I have a really strong value hand, but versus a fish, they're not going to be thinking about that stuff. Defending ace jack suited from the big blind to under the gun +1 open from Jewy Poppy, and I don't really hit anything. So I decided to call one time for backdoor straights, backdoor flushes, and maybe it'll go check check, or maybe I'll hit a jack or ace or whatever. I think that I should probably call this. And whenever I miss equity on the turn, I think that a check check would be fine. Whenever he checks behind, I expect him to be checking behind a lot of 9x, like 9 ace, 10 ace, pocket 8s, something like jack queen, maybe not. I think he'd be betting jack queen, so maybe something like jack king, perhaps, or jack ace. But I think that there's enough to where I can just put a half pot bet in, and he raises me. It didn't really seem right. Now I could give him king queen, but I believe that he would be betting king queen most of the time on the turn, because he might think that I'm calling with ace high. I think that he'd believe that my range includes a lot of ace highs whenever I call, or under pairs to 10s and 9s. If he's trying to get me off a 9x or pocket 7s or something like that, I think that he should have bet the turn, because he has a lot of equity with king queen. It seems a little fishy because I'm betting, and I believe that he might actually value bet something like jack x, like jack queen or jack king or jack ace, I guess at this point, or maybe just some kind of a spew, because I read the notes and he does have spew in him, where he just does really random things sometimes that just don't make any sense. So I make the call this time, and he has king queen, and I actually never expected him to have king queen here. I know it sounds kind of weird, but his bet turn is only 54%, but versus me and versus like how we've played together, I think that he should be betting king queen there almost always, because he's only afraid of pocket 5s or pocket 9s really. I'd probably be 3-betting pocket 10s some of the time, pocket 9s some of the time, or I'd be check raising some of the time. I don't know. Either way, I guess maybe my read was wrong. And I would make a note about that, say that he checked behind king queen, that he doesn't always double barrel his equity. Okay, so I'm defending the button, I guess you could say, with 6-8 suited, and there's a very, very weak player. Zeus Spartan, he's extremely weak player. Pretty happy squeezing in 3-bet percentage, so I was a little bit nervous that I might get squeezed with 6-8 suited, but I think that it was worth the cost, because he's very, very spewy. He'll shove all in with air balls. I flop top pair with backdoor flush, and he bets again, so I'm gonna call. And now he checks, and I bet. I make a small value bet. I think that he's gonna be scared of this board almost like 95% of the time. This player, 1.5 aggression factor over 800 hands. Bet flop and bet turn are pretty small as well. His 3-bet's pretty high, his 4-bet's pretty normal. I guess those are pretty normal, I guess. Mine's 6.23 bet. His squeeze is pretty high, but it's not a huge sample size. And when I read the notes, I didn't read anything about them being super bluffy. Over 800 hands, I have a few notes about this player, and nothing that says that they get super aggro or super bluffy. And now I'm trying to think of what bluffs he would have here, other than something like ace queen offsuit with an ace of clubs, because he's barreling the turn as well. So I expect him to have a set on the turn, over pairs, queen jack. But also, I do give him credit for having a flush draw as well, like a nut flush draw on the turn that wants to try to represent the queen. So whenever he check jams all in, this is a very, very big bet. I have to call another $40 into 75, and I don't think that this is a bluff. This is a big laydown for me, and I had to really read the notes, think about what I remember from him in previous hands. And if he does have a nut flush at this time, I think that his line makes perfect sense. And because he's checking the straight. He's not going to be check raising a straight here. Even if he has the nut straight, if he has ace king of hearts, there's no reason to be check jamming ace king of hearts, right? And is he really going to be betting the turn with ace king suited with a Broadway and overs to a queen jack 8-2 board? I don't know. It seems like he's most likely to be betting equity on the turn with a flush draw of some sort. He's not going to be doing this with a set. There's no bluffs in his range here, I don't believe. Unless, like I said specifically, ace queen with an ace of clubs. And I think that's like 3 combinations compared to multiple combinations of ace x suited that could have gotten there. So I gave it to him. I gave him credit for the flush. I made a pretty tight fold. I do believe I made the correct fold. I don't think that I should have called that. It just felt so much like a nut flush. And there's no reason for me to overbet the river there either, because I just want to get a little bit of value from like queen jack or ace queen. So I flop second pair and I check. So I turn the nut trips with a nut flush draw and a straight draw, a Broadway draw versus a fish. So whenever they bet, I decide to call just to leave their bluff range in, because there's really nothing that I'm afraid of on this board. There's no card that can come out except for like an ace that I'm afraid of. That's the perfect card for me. Whenever they bet, I'm gonna jam, and they call, and the money goes to them. So before I show their hand, think about what possible combinations they could have here that have me beat. They limp under the gun. They don't have aces, and they don't have ace queen. They have queen 8 suited. So he hits a 3-outer on the river after I turn the nut trips and I turn the nut flush. He hits a 3-outer for a boat. Pretty sizable pot that I lost there. King 6 suited, I'm calling because there's a huge fish here. This is I think the same player as before. Yeah. I don't really believe it's that loose. King 6 suited plays pretty nicely if an ace hits the flop and there's a spade draw, or maybe I can hit like a 6-6 ace flop and get value from ace queen or ace king. King 6 ace, as long as they don't have ace king. There's a lot of flops that I could continue with, like 6 king jack would be nice. I decided to lead out here because the flop is super drawy, and if I get raised and then maybe if they bomb the turn, I could probably consider folding because they might have like king jack or a set at that point. So but nobody jams. Now, whenever 2 players call, I expect this player to be raising king jack in his sets a lot of the time, And this player I expect to spaz out with their sets and king jacks, especially this player with king jack. I think that he would just jam the flop. So whenever the 7 comes out, I'm only really afraid of king 7 suited, if this player wants to call with king 7 suited. So I decided to bet a little bit bigger this time, and this player calls again, and I actually think that I should have bet this bigger. Yeah. I'm gonna say that the turn bet was too small, because there's a lot of combinations of the 7 actually opens up extra straight draws plus flush draws, like 8, 9 of diamonds, 10, 8 of diamonds, you know, 10 queen of diamonds, ace, 10 of diamonds. So the 7 opens up a lot of extra combo draws. I could have probably bet this around 16 or 15, $16. And even if he thinks I have a set, but he's on a draw, he's probably going to call me anyway. And this player is probably going to call as well if they're on a draw. They could both have a draw. And if I bet small, this player calls, it's going to give this player a really good price as well. So whenever the ace hits, I'm actually not afraid of, I'm not afraid of the ace in any way at all, unless he specifically had 10 queen suited without the diamonds, or maybe the diamonds with 10 queen suited. So if he hits his Broadway on the river, I'm gonna call him off regardless of what he does. I'm not afraid of any 2 pairs at this point, because Jack Ace probably didn't get there. Ace King probably didn't get there, because this player opened and this player did not 3-bet. So I'm not going to give him credit for Ace King. 10 queen suited is the only hand I'm afraid of, and that's only 4 combinations. So I checked to induce a bluff of broken diamonds, whatever diamonds they might be. Maybe even if he has a nut flush, he might even still bluff the ace to attempt to represent something like Ace King, I suppose. But he doesn't bluff. This is the player that check raised the river all in on the backdoor flush. And this player showed King Queen. He had King Queen. Oh no, I don't think, no, he had, I think he had 8, 9 of diamonds. He had diamonds of some sort. I think it was 8, 9 of diamonds. So he didn't bluff the turn, and he didn't bluff the river. So I make a note about that again, the pattern so far is that he has not shown to have a bluffy nature about him. And I do believe now that the low flush was a good fold, even more so after that hand. All I can do is bet versus a fish on a super drawy board here.